Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a very special video show, podcast, Q&A, whatever you want to call it. My name is Remko Rinkema. Daniel Negreanu joining me for 90 minutes of whatever you want to ask Daniel. We're going to dive into it ahead of the 2023 WSOP. We'll make sure to tackle the upcoming 25K fantasy draft. We'll dive into some player of the year predictions, maybe some bracelet bets and predictions. Maybe Daniel is going to play cash games all summer. We're about to find out here on this very broadcast. Send your questions in the chat on YouTube. That's all you have to do. Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, all that good stuff. But Daniel, first, there's only one question I can start with. Is the Las Vegas Daniel Negreanu WSOP bracelet drought finally ending this summer?
Well, I believe so. I do. I think, like I've had a weird run the last 10 years or something, but I feel like I'm going to have a year. I mean, hopefully it's this year where I just knock off like 3 or 4. Just boom, 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 boom. I've always been kind of streaky in that regard. So if I get one early, then, watch out. I think I can string together a few. I have a vision where I win an online one, and then I'm playing the 10K Raz, and I win that one. So like 2 bracelets in 2 days. I don't know. I have good vibes about this year.
Yeah, it's going to be sort of a rerun of the past few years. The vlog is back. Your grind is back. I heard that pizza is back on the menu. There's no working out. Are you basically going to sort of do a copy of last year as far as WSOP? Are there any changes to look out for?
For the most part, it'll be a copy, but I do plan on bringing some bands to the, like my little private room there. Just some resistance bands. And I'm not going to, because here the thing is, I'm pretty extreme. Like when I work out hard, I go like super hard, organized, and then when I don't, I just don't, right? So my middle ground game is very weak in terms of just doing something. So this year I plan on, whenever I can, whether it's 15 minutes, 20 minutes, or 20 or 30, just doing something, just to get my blood flowing and feel a little bit healthy. And I'm going to eat whatever I want to eat, but I'm also going to, this is the same as I've always done, sort of have a base of healthy. And then the ancillary food is whatever, the body craves.
Yeah, of course. Long days, long grind. Are you going to be jumping into stuff from the start? Are you going to save some energy by late dredging? Have you made a sort of a mental schedule of what you are going to play and maybe for sure not going to play?
I promised myself a couple of years ago, I think it was 2 years ago, that, so I play for 7 weeks, play every day, right? There's only so much mental energy you have to focus at a high level. So what I've decided, I'm forcing myself to do is if there's like a 1500, say stud 8 or Omaha 8, whatever it is, even if I'm ready to play on time, do not. Because generally speaking, what happens is I show up and I'm like, why am I here on level 1 of this thing, grinding out, against 800 players or something like that. So the way that I do it is with the smaller buy-ins, I force myself to come at least 4 hours, maybe 5 hours, give myself a little time before rebuys if there's a rebuy for those. But then for the big ones, the 10K and above, I try to show up on time whenever possible. Now, the only times where that wouldn't be the case is if, let's say, I bust an event and it's like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I don't jump in from one bust to the other because I'm not mentally set. So I go to my room, like you've seen in the vlogs, take a nap, hour or two, whatever the body needs, and then I'll jump in when I'm ready. And that's a formula I think that makes a lot of sense. And I've tried it out over different years.
Are there specific learnings from last year related to your play, your level of play, perhaps fatigue that you're taking into account this year? Did you study certain spots? Did you work on your tournament game in some kind of way? And are you sharp in the tournament mixed games, which of course only come around once a year?
Yeah, I would say, without being too technical and without giving away too much, I would say there are some things that I was doing last year in some of the events that's not me. It's not stylistically my sort of approach. So this year I'm going to look to sort of clean that up a little bit and have faith in the game that I created. I think honestly, through the Super High Roller Bowl, what I was able to do is sort of break down the ways in which people I think are, implementing theory incorrectly and figure out exploits. So that'll be the attempt again this year. I'm not saying that I'm going to exclusively limp or that I'm going to be raising. I'm going to do whatever I feel makes sense at the table. So for example, if I'm at a table of mostly solver, because there's different types of high limit players, right? Some that are very like solver, dialed in, and then there's others who are more like, I guess, for lack of a better term, field players. Against the solvery guys, I'm going to use sizes and I'm going to use limps and all these types of things of things they just don't study, right? And maybe against some, other tough players who, are more versatile, I'm probably will go with more of a theory-based approach.
So you've had quite a bit of success on the PGT to start off this year. Of course, that's all going to lead up to the PGT Championship in December. For those unfamiliar, it's going to be $1 million free roll for the top 40, and we're going to also send some subscribers to that tournament, so stay tuned for more of that on our PokerGo socials. But it is a pretty big jump from regularly grinding in the studio against Sam Soverell and David Peters and all those guys to jumping into the WSOP events. Does that excite you? Are you mentally tuned into the game that you've been playing at the studio a lot? Is it hard to switch back and forth? And how do you look at sort of the difference between your usual grind up until this point and now what's to come?
Yeah, so I was really thrilled with sort of the PGT this year. Tim Duckworth, the commissioner, created a mixed game series and a PLO series. So it was a very different vibe than normal, and the turnouts were great. And it had more of a WSOP vibe for me. And I love playing mixed games. I really have fallen in love with PLO as a tournament game specifically. And looking at my results in that game, they've been quite good, over the long haul. I mean, I've had some cashes, but I would say that the first part of this year for me has been a disappointment. I'm stuck money. I've got 800K in cashes, but I've spent more on buy-ins. But you're right in the sense that, it's a different caliber of player. But in most of the events that I play, it will be a very similar, crew of players. I'm playing high buy-in events. The difference is, of course, in the, I guess, no, it's the same as the mixed game crew that I played with at the PGT. The one difference will be some of those big field events. I don't typically play very many of them, but, I see the Sean Deebs and the Dan Zacks, they're always doing both. And I try to prioritize the big stuff. But, if it makes sense to drop a stack or two and some of the smaller stuff, I'll play it, but I'll force myself to not try really hard.
So if we take the 50K in the main event out of the equation, which event would hold the most value to you to win? I know money, of course, let's say money being equal. Is there a specific event or an event format that you would love to win a bracelet in this summer?
Yeah, you took the two best ones, of course.
Yeah, those are top two for everyone.
Yeah, that's a great question. So for me, and this is based on this year at the PGT and last year, I've had a newfound appreciation and respect for dealer's choice. Now, in the past, I didn't love dealer's choice because I had a couple games that were weak and a lot of people called them. So I was like, oh, it's kind of a stupid thing. But understanding how many more variables there are in dealer's choice, right? Not only are you thinking of well, what game am I good at, right? What game are my opponents bad at, right? What stage of the tournament is it? What does my stack size look like? What are the stack size of my opponents? So, for example, I was playing and I was calling PLO a lot because I had a really good PLO table. And Ben Lamb was at the table. He just showed up, but he was short on chips. So he wasn't a threat. So I'm like, all right, PLO's fine. I don't have to worry about that. Then he doubled up and he had a big stack on my left. I'm not calling PLO anymore. We switched to limit hold'em, something where I neutralize the advantage. So constantly evolving and thinking about, a set of games. A guy like Adam Friedman, who won the thing 2 or 3 times in a row or something like that. That's his biggest strength, is he's adequate at all the games, but he's very good at figuring out what your weak games are, and he just gives you a steady diet of that.
Yeah, dealer's choice definitely relatively new at the WSOP. Of course, the 50K horse is what sort of started the higher buy-in mixed game craze of the WSOP. Back in the past, there were 10K events of the other varieties, but never really put together besides maybe some shoe or whatever else was being organized back in the day. But yeah, dealer's choice, fairly new, which is funny, but it is cool to see that grow in popularity. For the people in the chat right now, send your questions in. I'm going to take it from the top, scroll back up, make sure we get through all these questions. I see all your names in there. I will just start at the very top here. The first question that I see is from Martin. Martin says, Daniel, how many people do you think are actually trying to win POI each year? Do you think there's actually people coming into the summer with that as a goal, or does that evolve organically from having a hot start?
So no question, there's a very small group of players that go into it saying, that's a goal. Myself, Sean Deeb, Dan Zack. I saw Ryan Lang. Ryan Lang this year said, he's going to throw his hat in the ring, if you will. So those are the mainstays. In addition to that, you always have the phenomena of somebody starting off hot, and a Josh Aryeh, who's like, you know what, I'm in this thing, so now I'm going to grind. I'm going to drop stacks and things like that. Same thing happened with a guy like Robert Campbell. Those aren't names you would typically see in the race, but I think it comes down to if you have a good start, good 3 weeks, then, it ups the amount of events you play. You're usually doing well, playing well, all those things. But I would say, you're looking at 5 players-ish that target specifically player of the year each year.
Another question from Martin. What are your plans for this year's vlog? What can the people expect?
It's a good question. I was just talking to my vlog guy here, and it's like I feel like I haven't done it in so long that I'm like, oh my God, I forget how to do it, But it's just like riding a bike, and obviously, the format will be probably similar in terms of what I do, but the way that the vlog works, like if you saw last year's vlog, right? It goes where it goes. Like we had a crazy stalker, like who said I had a fake family in Lake Havasu. We had another one who says in the hallway I brushed up against her and was following her. Thank goodness I had camera footage to show that's not the case. So there's all kinds of weird tangents that it goes on, and I just go with wherever it takes me. So I'm the creator. I'm the filmic. I shoot all the footage. Like we have a guy who shoots B-roll and stuff for the the segues and things. But other than that, everything that goes in the vlog is stuff that I come up with. So expect a lot more of the same, really. I mean, there's not a lot of like, yeah, I don't go into the vlog going this year. Actually, I did say that one of the things I might add a little bit is, with the chainsaw corner that I do with Alan Kessler, people enjoy that. I may do some hand breakdowns with Alan, which will be like, what? Yeah. So like maybe we'll do the graphics and stuff, and we'll have the chainsaw, corner there.
That's going to be amazing. Yeah, always one of my favorites. Please break those clips out specifically and put them as short clips on Twitter, just so that I don't miss those, because the vlog.
That is a plan too. Yeah, that's actually one of the things that we're doing too. I'm not going to do any of that, but we'll have a team of people who are going to actually do a lot of this, take a lot of shorts from the vlog and, create content that way, because it's very popular these days.
Exactly. We just want that short form content. Let's see what else we got here. Let's go through these questions. A lot of questions about the vlog. We just answered all of those. Let's see what else is here. I think someone deleted their question, but I thought it was really good. All right, actually, here it is. Which phase of the tournament is your best and your worst? That's a kind of interesting one to think about.
Yeah, that's a great question. Really good. It made me think, because I think it varies depending on the game, right? I think, say, for example, no limit hold'em high rollers and stuff like that. Unfortunately, the weakest part of my game is probably, knowing shove and call ranges. Like when you're with ICM, when there's like 15 big blinds or less and stuff like that. Like that's obviously a very important part of poker, but I find it really boring and I haven't put a lot of work into that. So for example, in no limit, I would say my best work is done when we're deep. If we're 100 big blinds deep, like it's very difficult. I'm just going to be honest. It's very difficult to get me when we're deep. It's just hard to get me. I play very good defense. I throw enough jabs. I grind hard enough. I minimize. I cut losses. Like part of like the way that I look at those stages too is like money saved is money earned in a way too, where other people might have lost 12 big blinds or 15. I lost 2, and I still get, maybe I don't get as much value as a guy like Adamo who's in there, going to battle, but I'm a very difficult guy to knock off in the early stages of those. Now, when it comes to the mixed game events, the limit formats and stuff like that, I think the opposite becomes a little bit more true. Like I have my aggression levels kick up when, the money comes up and ICM spots. Like I feel very confident. And I also feel very confident in my short game play in a game like stud 8 or better, when I've only got 8 antes and things like that. So more confidence later in the mixed games, but in no limit, I would say that's true earlier.
All right, let's go into
and I would say this. Sorry.
Yeah,
so ahead. It really does go full circle. For mixed games, probably weakest when it's like when there's a lot more multi-way pots. They're just more difficult to navigate, period, right?
Yeah.
You find yourself in a lot more tough spots when there's 4 different hands. You're thinking about 4 different ranges and how you do against them. That's just more difficult, I would imagine, for most people.
For the fans that are coming out to see you at the WSOP, a question from multiple people here wondering, what's the best way to ask you for a photo if we see you? I know the answer. You always bring this up all the time, but it is a good refresher for everyone who's watching.
So please, if you don't mind, understand that when I'm on a break, I really need that break. I run through the hallways for a reason, because I want to get to the break and I need that time alone, right? So just anytime I'm on, don't be the guy that's just waiting for the break. That is the worst time possible. So wait till the break is over. You can say to me, hey, can I get you after the break? Perfect, right? Then I'll go to my thing, come back. And then, right before we start or whatever. The best way really is to, if you come to my rail whenever I'm playing, try to get my attention when I'm out of a hand, right? If I'm out of hand and say, hey, can you sign this? Can you get a picture, whatever? I'll come to the rail, when I'm out of a hand and stuff like that. That is the absolute best time. And really, kind of like the only time. Like if I'm running, generally speaking, if I'm in the hallways, I'm trying to get somewhere, right? And what people don't realize sometimes is like, I just want one picture. Like that's you. There's 7 people behind you, okay? And then those people see, then other people start to see that, and then there's more, and then they know all of a sudden it's not just you, right? And like, because it's really funny to me when people say last one, last one. I'm like, you say last one. What about the people behind you, right?
Yeah, so very very good to get your attention during play, and of course there's lots of play, so lots of time as well to get your question and request in. Let's see. Israel Velis is asking, are you a fan of the WSOP becoming longer each year with more events? Of course, for some context, back when I started, I believe there were 60 events. When Daniel started at the WSOP, there might have been 30 or maybe 25. Now I believe we're up to well over 90. So Daniel, how do you look at that?
Yeah, when I started, it was less than that. I think it was 20, maybe. Yeah, I do think we're hitting a tipping point where we're going a little too far with too many. I firmly believe that, because not only do you have the Summer World Series, you also have the World Series, the GG events, you have the WSOP.com events, you have the World Series Poker Europe. So I think scaling back on the number is something that will likely happen in the future. I could see like, well, I don't want to give away too many ideas right here, but I do think that maintaining the prestige is it has some importance. And of course, if you have way too many of them, part of what makes the World Series like special is that everybody comes for it, right? But then if you have too many and they're all over the world in too many different places and there's too many being given out, it's no longer that, right? It's now regional.
Right. So is there a number you have in your mind where we should go back to a certain number, or maybe
I think the number, considering, like I said, the WSOP, the Europe events, whatever other World Series events across the world, I think in total for the entire year, 100 is the number.
Right.
You have like, say, whatever, maybe 65, 70 during the summer. And then you reserve, another 10, 15 for WSOP, another 10, 15 for, GG Poker, and then the Europe one and whatever else.
All right, there it is, 100 bracelets. So that's still a ton, especially if you compare that to the era during which you started. To pivot or to sort of attach this to that and how that has expanded. Back in the day, were there people grinding the same way for things like POI and keeping track of the bracelet count? Or is that something that really came when the media picked up on things after Moneymaker and that started to grow a little bit more?
I remember the first year they had a player of the year, and it was very new. Like, I followed it closely because I was doing well. Back then, like you said, there's only 20 events. I think I made 5 final tables, right? And I was very like dialed in. I wanted to see the numbers. They didn't have them on the website or anything like that. And I ended up winning player of the year that first year, and they gave away a Toyota Tundra. And I remember they didn't really make a big deal of it. I sort of did, because I thought it was really cool. And I was like, all right, I showed up for the final table and I got a little, hello, how are you? A little cheer or whatever like that. But I would say, like most people back then, other than Helmuth, weren't like really big on a bracelet chase and stuff. Like if they were, guys like Chan and Doyle and whatnot would have been playing a lot, which they weren't. They're just playing cash. They didn't care so much. Really, I think what sort of took us to the next level, I really believe this, is the World Series Poker Fantasy Draft. I believe when that started, like a lot more people started to like be more involved in their stats and their points and their numbers and all this kind of stuff. And you feel now that people want to be drafted. They do. And when they are, even if they don't have any financial incentive, they feel obligated. So like, for example, Remko, you draft a guy, and you're like, you go, oh man, I got you this year. Part of him says, you know what? All right, I'm going to do my best for you. Right. And I see that all the time with guys that wouldn't play like a full schedule or a lot of events. I do think it brings in more players and, more people want to, be part of it.
So 25K Fantasy, big topic. I'm glad you breached it. Monday, the draft is happening. It's going to be streamed live on this YouTube channel. Tim Duckworth, once again, the auctioneer, does a great job at that. Expectations are high. I listened to the PokerGO podcast last night. You guys were talking about how this might be the biggest one yet. What can you tell us about some confirmed teams? What can you tell us about your strategy? Give us sort of an update on 25K Fantasy as it stands. And for those unfamiliar in the chat, if you're watching, this is a fantasy league for the WSOP. The teams or players draft their own teams. It's a 25K buy-in. Regular payouts the same way you would for a poker tournament. And I believe this goes back to 2010 or 2011 that you started organizing this. And it's always sort of the unofficial, in my mind, the unofficial start of the WSOP. So please, what do you have for us this year?
Yeah, so for this year, for the first time ever, as you said, I'm certain this is going to be the biggest one we've ever had. It's not even a question. Normally, when it comes to this time of year, I'm always like calling people and asking, like, "Hey, are you going to do it this year? Come on, join us!" Right? I want to see a nice big number. I haven't done that at all this year. I haven't looked back at any past ones and said, "Are you in?" Because we've gotten so many people outside of the core group, like a lot of the returning people from last year. We've got guys like Ren Lin. He's put together a team which is unique and fun, and then you have like the Brazilian connection of like Joao Vieira and Yuri. Yuri, the poker player. You got Dan Fleischman, who's always like a stalwart at these things. Then we've seen some of the teams that used to do like partners, like they're going on their own. They want their own team.
Oh,
Yeah. And I imagine Ryan Reese wants redemption because last year he picked Chris Vitch. And as a result of that, it happened several years in a row where somebody would pick somebody where everybody knew they're not playing. And I almost said something in the moment. I probably should have, but like I'm going forward this year with a new sort of idea that if there's a player that everyone knows isn't playing, I don't want somebody getting stuck with them. So we're creating a list. And on that list is going to be a combination of two different players, players that the commissioner has voided from playing, from being chosen for whatever transgressions they have. And then another group of people who have said, they're just not coming this year. Someone like a Eugene Kachalov, Jesse Martin, whatever. So that way, anyone who bids on them, that bid is void and they don't get stuck. And I think that's in the spirit of it. It's like some people pushed back and said, oh, that's part of the fantasy thing. It's part of the work. I'm like, we're not, it's not about being cutthroat here. It's supposed to be about fun. And it's no fun when you have 7 players when everyone else has 8.
so question for you, and this goes back to my all-time favorite moment, and I was in the room for this when you drafted Steve Bilirakis in the era in which there was not such information out there about who was playing and who wasn't. He was not going to play, and then he ended up talking to you and did end up playing a bunch of events. My question in line with that is, do you have horses you're hoping to draft? Do you back players on the regular? Do you have your own stable that you're sort of hoping to get involved here?
Yeah, I know. I certainly have a few guys, who I take pieces of and different things, and they'll be on my radar. But I've learned my lesson. Not only from that year, but from some other years. I do it every year. I always pick one dud where I'm like, oops. So the thing I've learned, and someone asked me for advice on how to draft, and said, number one, don't bid on anybody that you haven't spoken to. Just don't. Right? If you don't know this person's schedule and you think that their number is really low, there's probably a reason you haven't thought of. Right? I remember, for example, last year, Dan Shack bid 4 on himself, and he has a team and he's there. I said, okay, he should go for more than 4. He's like a 12. I didn't really have him on my radar as a choice. So I said 5 because I figured it was going to go to, and then nobody bid. I was like, oh shit. Well, that's all right. Let's go Dan Shack. You know what I mean? So I would say, especially with, as there's 20 teams that we're going to have this year, in some of these drafts, what you do with auctions is you try to push people to spend more money on players, right? And because they're going to bid more, you got to be more careful with that in a draft with so many players, because you don't want to all of a sudden bid 45 on someone that you don't want and then get stuck with them.
Yeah, very deep player pool this year for the draft. If you guys have any questions about it, please send those in. I'm going to go back to the chat right now to pick up some more questions here. If you do enjoy today's show, please like the video, subscribe to the channel. We're going to do tons of free streaming of WSOP events on our YouTube channel, along with the regular programming on PokerGO. It's called The Horseshoe Table, commentary by myself and Donnie Peters. Should be more laid back, more casual, some giveaways and all that stuff. So please make sure you're around for all of that. Let's see. Oh man, we have a lot of questions. Let's burn through some of these here. Johnny Short, will you be selling any action for the fans this year?
So I did already, right? Every year, I put out a package on pokerstake.com. I put up 25%, and it sold out very quickly, as it does. And I realize that, and I know it's going to sell out fast. So what we do for the bigger events, some of the bigger stuff, I'll reserve 10%, and then the morning of, we're going to post that. And if I don't end up playing because I'm in something else or whatever, you get a refund, of course. But yeah, there will be opportunities. You'll have to tune into the vlog, because generally what will happen is the vlog will release, and about 30 minutes later, the piece will go up.
Perfect. Hugh is asking, Daniel, how are your dogs doing, and who's going to win the Stanley Cup?
My dogs are good, man. I'm so happy. My one of my little guys, Rocky, had like a slip disc, and he's doing so much better now. He's great. The other guy had his teeth fixed and everything. So they're doing good. As far as who's going to win the Stanley Cup, I'm not just saying this because I'm from Las Vegas, but They've got a good control of the series against Dallas, right? They're deep. Aiden Hill is playing well. They're incredibly healthy. They're being well coached. And, Florida's waiting on the other side. And they're an 8 seed, but they're not like your typical 8 seed. That's a team that won the President's Trophy a year before. And they have a goalie that is playing above the rim, world class, something like we've never seen before. Having said that, I think we're a little deeper. I would say this, like Florida, probably their very, very best players, like the Barkov and Matthew Tkachuk, are better than ours by a nose. But the third and fourth line, if you will, I think we're a little more deeper, a little more balanced, especially on defense. I think our solid 6 is strong. So I do think that, I picked Dallas to win it all before the playoffs started. I did. They were my pick. But obviously down 3-1. I think Vegas should be able to close that out and win the cup this year.
And then we haven't seen Phil Kessel at all. Some talk about his lack of defense. Are we going to see Phil again in the playoffs?
That's frustrating because I thought he was playing really well. He played for the first 4 games. He played about 12 minutes a game. Not a single goal was scored when he was on the ice. He had 2 assists in those 4 games. He gets no 4-hour time, no overtime time, whatever like that. But he was playing well. Like he's a playoff performer. He's a proven playoff performer where he's won 2 cups. Clearly, the coach doesn't feel like Kessel fits into what he wants to do. He'd rather have like a Brett Howden type guy on the third line on the wing. And, that's of course, his choice. I feel like if it were up to me, I would want Phil out there, but I don't know, like, because you look at Michael Amadio too, he's not in the lineup as well. So there's 2 forwards that are out because Bluger's taken over center of the 4th line, and Barbashev was added at the deadline too, and he's taken up one of the wings. So they're just incredibly healthy right now, like the healthiest they've ever been.
Yeah, that's crazy because they had so many injuries throughout the season, but it's all coming together now. And it's pretty nice if you can ride the 4th, 5th, 6th goalie. I mean, they've had so many goalies, and then
well, that's the thing about I just tweeted this the other day. I predicted Aiden Hill would ultimately be the starter. Not necessarily saying he's the best, but Robin Lehner, I think, who is the best goalie, he was out for the year. Logan Thompson is a rookie, and for those that don't know, goaltending is a very difficult position. And I just genuinely thought that he's very likely to get hurt playing that position. A groin pull or something like that. He did. I thought Aiden Hill is a solid goalie. He had a little bit more experience playing in Arizona and stuff like that. He's good in this system, the Bruce Caddy system. He's like what I call like a low event goalie. There's not a lot of flash and athleticism. He's just in the right place and lets the puck hit him, if you will. And so, yeah, I think, I would have called him the 3rd string goalie because like you got Lehner, LT, and then him.
Right. Next one. And if you're watching this, we're going to go chronological order through the chat. So I might not be seeing stuff at the bottom right now, but I got to stay on this. Lots of going on. Jamie Watterson is asking, Daniel, do you respect Helmut's results?
Of course. No, how can you not? I mean, listen, you look at this guy year in, year out, he's got the best World Series of Poker results, in the world. There's no question I respect his results, right? I generally don't, like, say, for example, I look at like other sports, right? Michael Jordan, who I think is the greatest basketball player of all time, has never once said, I am the GOAT. I am the greatest. I think generally speaking, that's in poor taste, even if you believed it. I think Phil Ivey's the best poker player in the world. I've never heard Phil say, I'm the greatest. You could look at a guy like LeBron talking about how he's the greatest now and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, listen, you're good. But when you say stuff like that, it's demeaning and disrespectful to the people that came before you. I think that's what Jordan gets. So with Phil, his results are no question, the best results. But like, do I think he's the best at, poker? No, that's just no. Like, I don't. He's got the best results, over the years. But I wouldn't. He's not the king. No, I mean, I said it on one of the Poker After Dark. I said, Phil, you're not better than Phil Ivey at literally anything. And I was like, except promoting yourself and like wrangling billionaires. But other than that, there isn't anything I can think of. Like what? Basketball, Pac-Man, backgammon. What are you better at? Forget anything poker related. Like you're not better than Ivey at anything.
Maybe better at eating sandwiches in a creative way. Shout out to Donnie Peters and the call of the century, the roast beef sandwich. We'll hopefully get more of that this summer. On the Ivey topic, small little pivot here. What's the, like, you are like the only insider to Ivey that I feel like we all have, and even you have very limited information. So it's like the hardest man to get to, the hardest man to know anything about. What can you tell the fans about what you know about Phil's sort of ideas about the WSOP?
Phil loves playing the WSOP. He loves it. Like, he loves the grind and whatnot. I think now he is a little bit older than he was, and he's now a dad. So he's got other priorities a little bit. So I don't think you'll see, Ivy this year. He doesn't have any side bets or anything like that. I don't expect to see him playing in the $400 Colossus or anything. I expect he'll show up and play some, but that'll depend on cash games going on at Bellagio. I think that's his main focus, is just, playing there and, doing well.
Right. Yaesh Gupta says, do you think people could pursue poker as a career still in 2023 without risking it all?
Well, what is not, I mean, that's the hard part. I was going to say yes, no question about it. You absolutely can, become a professional poker player today. There's no barrier or reason why. There's actually more opportunities now than there's ever been. But without risking it all, define all, right? Like, I don't know what you're starting with. Right. If you're starting with a $3,000 bankroll, you're probably going to have to risk it all. If you've got $5 million in the bank, you're fine. You can do this as like a hobby to start.
Right. Do you have any thoughts on how people starting out, sort of making their way up the ranks right now, how they should turn this into a stable career? Are there any paths currently that you would advise them looking into?
The way that I've always advised people when they're thinking of, like, say, for example, leaving their job to play poker, is I would say take 1 year where you work and you also play poker, and then but you track your results very closely. You track your hourly rate, your monthly rate, see how different they look month to month. Because obviously, if you were going to play tournaments, which I don't recommend, as a primary source of income, they're going to be really swingy, whereas cash will be a little bit more stable. So I would recommend, starting just by like playing cash. And then once you get to the point where after a year where you look and you're like, I'm making more money playing poker than I am at my job, so I can devote more time to poker and get rid of my job. So essentially it would be like a transition period of at least a year where you don't just leap like, I'm quitting my job tomorrow, I'm going to start. Like, you don't have any know-how how much money you're going to make. Give it a year. Well, obviously you won't be able to play as much because you'll still be working, but make the transition smoothly.
Mazinger is asking, what's the longest Chidwick stare you've ever had to sit through?
It's interesting because, how do I say this without saying it? I think basically, I'll put it this way. His stares don't bother me at all. Like, Chidwick's stare is not something I'm like, oh boy. Phil Ivey's stare, that one's a little more intense. And, that one's a little more like, oh, fuck. But with Chidwick, I just kind of feel like he's looking at me, and it's cool. I'll look back. I don't really, I'm not too, I don't know how long the longest one is. Typically not too long because, you were playing shot clock tournaments.
Right. Are there, like, you mentioned Phil Ivey. Are there players that have an intimidating stare, or is it literally like one category, Phil Ivey, and the rest, whatever?
Well, he's not the number one stare. The number one stare for me, and he doesn't obviously play regularly now, but is John Juanda. He has this one eye that's big, and he gives you this, it's like, whoa. And it's like, he's just, from my memory, he was always just so good at just noticing that when people open, like, they just raise. This is a skill that I don't have, and I wish I did because it's so valuable. He can just tell if they're weak or strong. So when they like raise and he just feels like they're light, he just moves all in. Doesn't care. 8-4 off, 7-2 off. He just moves in on them, because he knows that they can't call or they're not going to call. And, that's a very valuable skill late in stages of tournaments. So when I play with Juanda, I'm always so careful when I'm raising and opening that I'm like really on my A game and not being sloppy with it. Because if I am, I know that he's just going to stick it in my face.
That's so interesting. God, Juanda is definitely someone that I hadn't thought of in a long time. I hope he comes out and plays a few events. Chris is asking, what's your general advice for Vegas/WSOP first timers?
I would say, if you're a first timer, the goal should be to really just soak in and enjoy the experience, like really have fun with it. And then I think the best way to do that is to kind of plan ahead, right? Look at the schedule, take a deep dive and see like what events like really sound fun to you. And what can you do, like where you take like maybe if it's going to be a week for you, like just pick that week and then sort of plan it out, come up with a bankroll amount that you're going to need for that, put it aside, look to see like what your days are going to look like. And then if, in addition to that, you want to have some fun, you want to go see some shows or whatever, like incorporate that. And I think like anything, like I think for me, I'm different. My wife is completely opposite. Like I like to have a very specific plan. And if you know, you don't go with the plan, that's fine. But at least you have a plan, right? She just sort of is like, the type, which a lot of people are, let's just show up and figure it out when you get there, right? I think with something like this, if you want to get the most out of it, plan ahead and pick the right week.
Matt Grapenthien in the chat asking, will you skip events for Golden Knights home games?
No, I'm not going to skip events. I thought of that, and I was like, I looked at, say, game one, which was potentially going to be day 2 of the World Series. Like, it's going to depend. Like, I will late reg. So if I'm not in something, right, I'm not going to like not play a tournament the day before because there's a game tomorrow, right? So I'll play that tournament. If I'm still in, but then I miss the game. If I'm out, and there's a tournament that started at 2:00, I think the game started at 5, so I can go to the game and then I'll late reg, like say, for example, the 1500 dealer's choice or something like that.
Nans is asking, do you see an old school player winning WSOP Player of the Year this year, you included? And by old school, he means a player that's been around for 20 plus years. It almost feels as though you're the only one in that category that still plays the volume necessary to do something like that.
Yeah, here's the thing. I think it's a very small group, which is one, but I do think so. Yeah, I mean, I think that yours truly will, an old school guy, if you will win Player of the Year this year. My goal was to win it 3 times before anyone else did, 2, and I did, and I won the 3rd one in 2019. But then 5 days later, was told that you actually didn't win. So, but for a moment there, I was a 3-time WSOP Tournament Player of the Year.
I mean, if I had to put a line out there, knowing how dedicated you are, you're going to probably win it at least 2.5 more times in your lifetime, given how
it's tough, because like you said, not only are you dealing with other guys who they play more events than I do. Like Dan and Sean will play more tournaments. Like, they have a different strategy. They like attack to all those, the big buy-in, the small buy-in stuff. I don't have the mental energy for that. So it's tough. And then you also have, like I said, some people who just have a hot run, and there's always going to be that. It's kind of like if you think of golf, right? Think of the PGA Tour, and let's say there's 100 players in a field, right? Well, if that field was 10,000, right? You're going to have some weekend warriors that are just going to have crazy rounds and stuff like that. And it's going to be way more difficult to win tournaments. Just that's sort of what happened with poker when poker really grew. Is before, you had these 200 player fields, you see the same faces, right? And all of a sudden there's 3,000. It's like, well, wow, those same people, it's very difficult to get there to the final table.
I'm going to combine a few questions that I've seen in the chat into one. As it pertains to Triton events and Hustler Casino Live. We haven't seen you on the Hustler streams, and we haven't seen you in the Triton events. Is there a reason why you haven't been on those specific shows?
First and foremost, I really don't like to travel. It's like, I just hate it. I love being home, right? Secondly, Hustler's a live cash game stream. I find that personally, I know that people love it and they love watching it, and there's like a big one going on. I find it incredibly boring. Like, I don't know, like, it's just, I don't like it. Like, I don't enjoy it. It's just kind of like, I don't care about the money that much. So then I just sometimes I goof off and play like an idiot or whatever. And there's just nothing about it that is a draw to me. Like, oh, I want to go play on that. Like, even though LA is not that far, it's just not something I look at and go, this is going to be great. I know a lot of people love it. I don't. Triton, on the other hand, man, I always have FOMO every time. I sit here watching them because it's usually on early in the morning because it's late there. And I'm watching the streams, and those are ones that I definitely want to make it a point to come out to. However, timing wise, say for example, this last one, that's too close to the World Series for me. I'm going to be grinding 7 weeks. I want to be fresh. Now I want to go to the one in London, but that's going to be right after 7 weeks of a grind. So we'll see where I'm at, but they're definitely on my radar, like a lot of big tournaments, and they look like a lot of fun to play. But yeah, the stream stuff, I'll do the streams here at PokerGO Studio because that's just drive down the street and shoot the shit, have some fun here. But the idea of like flying to go play cash on a stream, ugh, just no.
Fair enough. Bob is asking, and I'm going to turn this into a bit of a larger question. Bob says, WSOP seems to have added a few freeze outs. Have there been any talks about a couple of no late reg tournaments? And in addition to Bob's question, I'm going to ask, what's your general sense on the WSOP schedule? And are there any big omissions? Are there any things you would like to see added in the future?
Yeah, so there's no late reg, although there's 2 that sort of have that. The heads up tournament, obviously, that has to go off with, a set number of people and, start when the registration closes. And then you look at the shootouts where it's like limited late reg, it's like where you got it an hour or 2. I don't think we're ever going to go back to a time where, you must show up for hand one. I mean, that's the way it was when I started. Like tournament started at noon. If you showed up at 12:05, you couldn't play. You were out. You missed it. Right. It was like a different world. Like I remember rushing down there to Binion's Horseshoe in the 90s, making sure that I got in on time. But because there's so many overlapping events now, you just be shutting a lot of people that might play. So for example, I'm playing in a tournament on a Monday. I make day two. Okay. And I bust somewhere in day two. I want to play that tournament. Oh, I can't because late reg, there's no late reg. It's like, it would hurt the numbers for sure. And I think it's fine. I don't think we need to like get rid of it. Late reg. It's okay. It serves a purpose.
Frankie B is asking, is Alan Kessler looking for compensation yet for his appearances in your vlogs?
Well, I did give him some Contenders clothing T-shirts. Those were pro bono because he says he doesn't buy any clothes. He's never bought clothes. He just gets free clothes. Everything free. He doesn't pay for anything. So we'll keep him. I'll keep him fed with T-shirts if need be. And underwear. I got new underwears for him.
Oh my God, that's incredible. Both Bodyguard 71 and Jack Mary are both asking, are there any chances we're going to see Amanda play any events this year? And if so, which ones is she going to play?
Yeah, I put out a Twitter poll and said like, okay, I said, because I use this language just to annoy people. I said, I'm ordering my wife to play one tournament this year at least. Which one should I force her to play? And I use those words just to annoy people. And because like, we're cool, we like to have that kind of banter between us. She later tweeted out something like, it's cute that he thinks there's rules. Yeah, So I put 4 events on there. I put the Gladiator, I put the ladies event, I put the Mystery Bounty, and I put the main, right? And obviously most people voted for the main. The ladies event, like a lot of people say, oh, you should play that. You'll love that. You'll have fun. I'm like, that is the least likely event that she'd want to play. Like, and she said this, the last time she played it years ago, she had a really bad experience playing it because she felt back then, for various reasons, like women were very catty and they were like really mean. And she much prefers playing with, men, women, it doesn't matter. But like, I don't know. And listen, that's not for me to judge. That was her experience, and I think I know why to some degree she had that experience. But I would imagine that if she's going to pick an event, probably wouldn't be the ladies' event.
Well, hopefully we get to see her in the main event. That'd be really cool. Question here from Dan, or no, sorry, Stick and D. I thought I said Dan for a second there. Daniel, do you do research about the other players at your table when you look at a seat draw for like day 2, 3, 4, that sort of thing?
Yeah, specifically for the main event, I actually have my guy now. What he does it for me. So I give him the sort of parameters of what I want. Because like when you play in the main event, you're playing with people you've never seen before, right? So what I ask for their Hendon mob, any specifics, like what their average buy-in is, different things like that, any sort of successes. And then I'll sort of have a printout in the morning of what my table looks like. And, because I think it matters. Like if you play with a guy who's, he only plays $50, $200, $300 tournaments, and you're close to the bubble, chances are you can apply extra pressure on him because that min cash is going to mean a lot more. So yeah, I definitely do that. And I also, as I play with people, I have a notepad, and anything that which is a cell phone, and anything I pick up, I just put in there so I have it in my memory bank.
Benny G is asking, and I wonder if this is the Benny G that we all know. He says, who are you least looking forward to having at your tables in the mixed game fields?
You know who I find tough? Because he's always battling. He's always in there. He's always fighting for pots, and he's good. It's almost like he looks kind of like a sloppy player, but it all works. And it's Scott Seaver, right? He's always grinding and fighting, and he's capable of doing so many different things, even in a limit format. So yeah, he's probably the one that I would have some difficulty with. But there's a lot of tough players, not just him.
Of course. Let's see. People asking about, do you have a trailer again? Do you have a private room? I believe it's the same room as last year.
So I don't have a trailer because there's no place to put it otherwise. And I feel bad because the guy, that was a big part of his business. There's 5, 6 trailers out there, and he had a generator, and, he was making decent money. And just unfortunately with the location, we looked everywhere. There's really no feasible place where we can put it. So I'll have a private room, where I'll have a fridge, a microwave, couch, place to, nap, my snacks, a coffee maker, and just a place to get away. Because if I don't, like, the thing is, if it was feasible, I would just get a room.
Right.
Problem is the room, that's like probably a 6-7 minute walk. So if there's only a 10 or 15-minute break, that means you just walk to your room, you take a piss, and then you walk back. There's no real opportunity to unwind. So I have a room that's relatively close, and I can get there in about a minute.
Speaking of snacks, what's your top 3 snacks during WSOP? Like, give me your reasons why, and what's your snack go to?
But does pizza count as a snack?
No, we'll get to that.
Okay. Well, I would say like I ordered some ketchup and pickle chips.
Ooh.
Not together, but ketchup and pickle separately. So potato chips, popcorn, and chocolate, like just chocolate peanut butter cups or all this, So yeah, so it's like chocolate ends up. I'm surprised actually. I eat a lot more chocolate than you think, but like carbs, sugar, chocolate, all the thing. I don't like have a display of like kale and like kale. I tried kale chips for a bit. I'm like, come on, bro. It's a World Series. No, put the kale chips away. Give me some real chips.
The funny thing with WSOP, and I think a lot of people that have been there, worked there, played there, is that even if you start the WSOP with good intentions regarding your health, you're going to reach a breaking point, and it's going to be like 1 a.m. on a random Wednesday where things are going very late, and then you're just going to have all the snacks you ever wanted, and then the day after, it is almost impossible to go back to your routine.
It's true not only with snacks, but it's also true with just like vibe. Like day one, hey man, good to see you. How you been? It's like, oh, I'm so excited to get started, right? 2 weeks later, Remko comes up to me. He's like, hey man, how's it going? I said, what the fuck did you say to me? What? How am I doing? What's your fucking why? What is it your business? What I'm fucking doing, huh?
Right.
Mind your own business. By week 4, yeah, the greetings are a lot different.
Yeah, selfie stick would not have gone flying on day 1. That just would not have happened.
No, day 1 you don't see stuff. Because day 1 actually did fly a little bit in the 100K. I came in 7th. I got ace king beat by ace queen, and it just sort of dropped a little bit, but it didn't actually hit the corner
right
like it did last year.
Yeah, we should frame that corner on the wall as like an in memoriam to the poor wall that had to endure that pain. But it created a funny moment, and Will Jaffe did a really funny job interviewing David Peters about that specifically. If you guys want to check that out, it's on our YouTube page as well. All right, back to the chat. By the way, if you're just tuning in, Q&A with Daniel Negreanu ahead of the 2023 WSOP. My name is Remko Rinkema. I'll be doing lots of live streaming with Donnie Peters on this very YouTube channel. We're going to do some final tables, some day 2 coverage with hole cards for those that are curious. We did a dress down version of live streaming last year. This year we're going to have hole cards, the whole shebang. It's going to be really fun and cool. So please subscribe to this YouTube channel and like this video, and then we're going to make sure that you have a good time with that. Back to the questions, Golden Knights questions. We tackled those, so if you want more Golden Knights stuff, skip back a bit in the conversation. We're going to skip those. That'll take too long. A few people asking about what's the best way to avoid the crowds on the breaks, registration, et cetera, et cetera. Are there tips you have for people to make their WSP experience a little bit more smooth?
Yeah, this one's very, very important. Well, listen closely, okay? Like, you asked if you're going to come out for a week or longer, especially if you're coming for longer, go one time, set up your Bravo account, fund the account, okay? Put your money in the Bravo account that you're going to need for all your buy-ins, right? Then when you want to play the Gladiator or the Colossus and there's a line for 3 hours, you'd have to stand and wait. You don't go in that line. You go straight to one of the kiosks. It's going to cost you $3, but the question is your time is 2 hours of your time worth $3? I would imagine so. And you go to the kiosk, print your ticket, you're good to go. So you fund your account first, and sort of make sure you have enough loaded in there. And then you never have to wait another line again, because that's probably the most, and there's just no other way around it, right? These weekend events, you're talking 15, 20,000 entries and stuff. So, you're just going to, there's no way to process that many people. So you'd be foolish to just complain about being in lines all the time when there is another option. It just takes being in line one time.
Right, exactly right. People, please do that. I see massive lines every year, and it always blows my mind that people are not aware of this option. Some speculation on main event field size. We've heard various different people say this is going to be the biggest ever. It feels as though WSOP is sensing that as well. I know that GG Poker is probably sending in a whole bunch of qualifiers. What number are we targeting? I bet 8,700-ish something was the Jamie Gold year. That was the biggest one ever. Are we going to break the record, and what's your number for the year?
I believe, and I've said this, I believe we're going to break the record by 200 players. So 89, whatever it was. I think that's my number. I think it's going to be big. I think there's a big push. Like you said, GG is going to be sending something like 600 qualifiers, and then you've got other qualifiers already happening across, the country and things. And I know the World Series wants to make a big push to kind of, break that Jamie Gold record. So I think this is the year.
So does the field size of the main event say anything, and those projections, about the general expectation for the other events of the WSOP? Do you think we're going to grow numbers across the board? Do you think there's just more interest in the main event because it's the main event? Like, how do you look at the overall interest in the brand WSOP?
I think numbers continue to grow, right? Ever since COVID, we talk about the moneymaker boom, and that was big. There was also sort of a mini boom with COVID. I think a lot of people, getting back into poker, playing online, and then, just itching to play, once they were able to after the lockdowns and things like that. So if you look at the mixed games, for example, the numbers are up across on all of them. I think every single one had more players. So that plus all of the, and here's the thing, you would expect, because there's so many more events, that numbers would dwindle because people are playing different things, but they're not. There's, even with events happening at other properties, like poker's just really big and really hot right now. Partly, I think, because of content like this on YouTube, people can watch, and the vlogs, and the different things people do. So many ways to get into poker now.
Absolutely. And once more, a reminder to get your Bravo account sorted, because the lines might be even longer if the WSOP continues to grow. Let's see. Back to the questions here. We tackled the Helmuth questions, so go back for that if you want to listen to that. Let's keep going here. We got the Trident stuff out of the way. The 25K Fantasy Draft. By the way, 25kfantasy.com has all your information about the teams and the players and the values. And the PokerGO podcast with Donnie and Tim will have probably daily updates on how the players they picked bubbled and how someone else's players made a big run in that event, because that is how it goes every year. But maybe because I'm not involved and I was the jinx, all of a sudden it's going to go well for them this year. That's also very popular. We got Brent Hanks in the chat. Brent Hanks is asking, should we draft Sean Deep, and why are you the correct answer? So I'm guessing he's saying, do we get you or do we get Sean?
Here's the thing. I genuinely believe this. Like, I've done World Series for many years now, and I know what works for my body. Sean Deeb is going to be doing something he's never done before, right? So the question is, will this help him or will this hurt him, this big weight loss bet that he has, right? I believe that when you're eating in a deficit and you're working out and you're trying to play like as many events as he plays, that, the carbs or the fuel help you get through it. I don't think that the added expended energy working out, as well as like eating less calories, bodes well. So he's still going to go for a lot, and he should, and he'll make deep runs or whatever. But I would say that as a result of what he's got going on outside of that, I'd say he loses value rather than gains value.
Well, there you go. And Stars and Scrubs seems to be the approach this year, because there are just so many players that are going to get drafted. Donnie Peters with a question says, Daniel, you've talked over the years about coming up in the poker world with Ivy, Juanda, Cunningham, guys along those lines. How often do you still talk to those guys these days?
So Ivy, I speak to the most of the four. John, I don't speak too much because, he's in Japan, whatever. Alan, once in a blue moon, hardly ever. So really of that group, I'm still probably closest with Phil. He's here in Vegas, and, we don't like get together like we used to and go golfing or go to dinners like we did, because he's got his life going on. I got mine. But he's the one that I would say of the four I still keep in touch with most.
RMX Indiana, regular in our YouTube chat, is asking, Daniel, do you look forward more to the 50K or the main event?
I look forward more to the 50K. Like I live and die by every street, and it's limit, right? Because you take a lot of beats and limit. You're like, and it's just so fun because it's like really deep stack. I prefer mixed games. I love it. The main event's always special, of course, right? In its own right. But something about the 50K, I was somewhat involved in like creating the event in the first place. And unfortunately, back a few years ago, when the event originally started, I don't think people know this, that it was horse, and then the final table was no limit hold'em. And the idea behind that was like we wanted to get more of some of like the older school players on TV, because with so many new young players or whatever, you weren't seeing like a lot of the the well-known names making final tables and stuff. So this was like, well, this will ensure it. And that first year, I think we had like Phil Ivey, Doyle, Chip, it was crazy. You had every big name player. And then it was on ESPN, and we got good numbers because the sponsors would put up money to get guys to play. And then there was a discussion internally with the Players Council about switching it to just straight horse all the way through. ESPN, then they did that for 1 year. And then ESPN said, guys, unless we go back to the no limit format, we're not going to air it anymore because people just don't, it's just not as popular, right? And I said, definitely go back to no limit hold'em. We never should have changed it in the first place. Howard Lederer, Annie Duke had their ear a lot more. And they said, no, it'll be fine. Just make it mix. And I'm saying, you're going to lose the TV. You're going to lose a third of the players because a lot of players back then, the way in which they were able to play these tournaments is if you were sponsored by an online site, they would put in the buy-ins if it's on TV. Right. So you take away the TV and that very year, it went from like 139 the year before to like 91 or something like that. And it was a direct result of the mistake they made. And now it is what it is. It works now. There's big bet mix. It's now a 9 game. It's evolved. So it's a good format now.
Yeah, it's seen many different formats, but that first year, definitely iconic. Chip and Doyle at the final table, as well as there's some dog.
His attention.
Dog action. I love it. That's great. Yeah, Sammy was here earlier. I had to close the door. But yeah, that first year, Chip and Doyle at the final table. Antonius was there also, sort of like a lot of different generations blending together. But it does bring me to the topic of Doyle Brunson. This is going to be the first World Series of Poker ever where Doyle is not going to be around. I believe you might have been the first one to tweet about Doyle's passing. What's it been like letting that news sink in, and what was your relationship with Doyle like over the years?
Yeah, I mean, Doyle was iconic, right? Like I remember when I started playing in the late 90s, like the goal was to get into the game that Doyle and Chip were running, right? Which was the biggest game in the room. And just, being in his presence, you had the sense that you were among an actual legend, like a dinosaur who had seen it all. And I think as Doyle got older, I just feel like people just thought like he's going to be here forever. Like it just didn't ever feel like, because there was always those stupid internet jokes about R.I.P. Doyle, and he thought it was funny or whatever. But like then to see it, be real was kind of like surreal, really. And there's been so many great tributes about, him, and he was like universally liked. Like very few people didn't like Doyle, and if they did, they just didn't know him.
Right.
It was just that simple. And like, yeah, I mean, my favorite moments with Doyle really also incorporate Phil Ivey because they really were like so competitive with each other, and like they were like brothers who would bicker all the time. Like you're young and you fight with your brother all the time. That's what those two were, and the back and forth between those two were some of the funniest moments ever. Like I remember one time on a golf course, I didn't tell the story. This was a good one too. Phil had a habit. He'd hit because we all play ready golf. He'd hit his golf ball. He'd drive off in the cart and he'd go look for it, wherever it was. And so there's one time he hits his ball and it goes into it looked like it went in the trees or something. It was like not going to be like just in the middle of the fairway. So he starts driving and Doyle goes, hey, now where are you going? He's like, what you trying to say, Doyle? I'm cheating? He goes, hey, I'm not saying you're cheating. I'm just suspicious is all. But they had so many epic fights on the golf course and at the poker table.
So did you ever have a rivalry at the table with him when you were playing the Bobby's Room game? Did you ever have golf matches with him? Do any memories stick out of you and Doyle competing?
Oh, I golfed with Doyle. I remember in the early stages when I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I was going to blow a couple million for sure. And I'm in like Doyle. He's like, he couldn't walk. So he had a crutch. And he's playing golf. Okay. So he'd drive his cart up. He'd take the crutch to walk up to the ball. Like, how am I going to lose to this guy? Right. And he would, obviously because of, his leg, he would tee it up from everywhere. And he would just like, he got to play from the ladies' tees. He would just hit it straight up the middle. 2-putt, par. 2-putt, par. Like he'd be shot like 80, right? And you're like, damn, Doyle rules are tough to beat. But like, I could only imagine, how good he was when he was younger, because he was a very athletic guy. He was a guy who was drafted by the Minneapolis Lakers. He was destined to have an NBA career until, he had his accident in the steel mill or something where he hurt his leg.
Yeah, it's going to be very strange not having Doyle at the WSOP, even though he didn't play much at all in the last couple of years, but his presence was always felt because he was still involved on social media. He would always make an appearance or two, and not having him around is going to be very strange, and I'm sure we'll have many more tributes throughout the WSOP and people reminiscing and telling stories. So I'm going to try to do my best to share those as well as they come up. Let's see. Back to the questions here. Martin with a question. Who would have been the best poker player? Rambo, Rocky, or Drago?
All right, Rambo, definitely not. Rocky or Drago. I think this one's easy, actually. If you think about like the way in which they approach, like, Drago would be in there with his team using solvers, right? Rocky would be in there trying to like play with heart. He'd be a field player, old school. Rambo, as sharp as he was out in the woods, maybe actually Rambo would have been second because I think Rocky probably be the worst player of the three. Rocky wasn't all that sharp. But no question, Drago would be well prepared. He would study in the lab. He would be injected with PEDs. So Drago would be the best.
Unifer is asking, hey, Daniel, I've been studying for a couple of years now. I just wanted to let you know that I appreciate all your advice and teachings. My question is, what is your best advice for poker beginners?
I'd say my best advice for poker beginners is to find a group. I just recently did a lecture with the Pocket Queens group, which is a group of women who sort of learn together. They get together once a week and they do a study group. And, Victoria, who plays in a lot of the high rollers with us, she sort of created this group and she's able to get access to some high level players like Lucky Chewy, myself, Maria Ho's done it. But ultimately, I think if you can find friends or you can find an online group or something along those lines that you can kind of bounce hands off of and stuff, because it's very intimidating learning, when you look at how sort of some people at the highest levels think about poker with solvers and outputs and the lingo. It can be very intimidating. Like it was for me as well. Like when I started down that path, I wasn't sure I could do it. I was like embarrassed. I was like, man, this is hard, but I'd say like, having a support group, if you will, of people that are like-minded or at your level, and they don't have to be like, players better than you can learn regardless of where you're at, And so the best thing I would do is like, whenever you have hands you're not sure about, you're like, I don't know, what was I supposed to do? Write it down on a notepad or in your phone, and then just sort of make sure you have the details right, and then bring it to your group. Go, what do you guys think? What do you think I should have done here? And then from that, you'll often like learn some new concepts that you can sort of slightly, because that's the coolest thing about being a beginner is everything you learn is going to be like, oh, whoa, mind blowing. Oh my God, that's so genius, right? The better you get, and the closer you get to playing really, really well, the fewer of those epiphany-like moments you have.
Born Again is asking, and it's a bit of a longer one, but it's interesting to get a general sense of your advice here. He says, I won a WSOP main event ticket in an online satellite. I play a lot of online poker. I've recently been catching some live tournaments. The other day, he said he won a live event in Philadelphia. Now, he said, most hands, everyone was limping with 4 or 5 limpers in front of me. Am I looking to raise to get a few of them out of the pot when I hold hands like 9-8 suited, ace-4 suited, pocket eights, small and pairs along those lines? Or do I just limp along with them to see a flop? And I think we can apply this question as sort of more a general approach to how we tackle pre-flop strategies.
All the hands you mentioned, those are really good multi-way hands. Those are hands that you want as many people as possible in, right? The hands where you want people out are like the ace-king, aces, kings, queens. Like those play better shorthanded. So all the hands you mentioned, really, your edge, if you're playing in a game with a bunch of weak players who limp a lot, your edge is going to be post-flop, right? It's very kind of like boring and simplistic. It's very easy though, right? So you limp along with people, right? You see flops. You don't bluff at the flops. There's no point. There's 7 people in the pot. Somebody hit something, okay? So don't be, oh, I'm going to represent the 5. Somebody has the 5, okay? They just have the 5 way too often. So when you do flop big draws or big hands, then you charge them, So basically what you're doing is an ascension of small ball. You're risking very little amounts, whether it's like, say it's a $10 limp, you put $10 in, and there's like 60, $70 in that pot, and you got 400 behind, you're going to try to get your 400 in when you have a very, very strong hand, right? So it's a very easy, simplistic way to play poker. Not a lot of bluffing involved, which there shouldn't be. It's just simply taking advantage of people's mistake of playing garbage hands and calling on the flop with garbage hands.
Tim Duckworth with the question, if you could apply an equity percentage, how valuable is your private room to you as a poker player during WSOP?
I think I'm unique in that I don't think the room would have nearly as much value for just like an average person who's not like a big name in poker, who isn't, who can literally just sit at a table by themselves and nobody will bother them, right? Like you can find a lot of spots, you just sit on the floor somewhere. So for those people, I would say there's really not a lot of value. I mean, it's obviously beneficial. It's great to have a little space for yourself. For me, it's imperative because I only have so much mental energy, and if those breaks were infiltrated by like people, I'm drained by being around people. I need that recharge. So for me, I don't know that I can put a percentage on it, but um, it would cause me a lot of pain and suffering if I did. I would actually probably just play a lot less events, as it turns out.
Right.
Because I couldn't be able to have that turnaround. I'm not gonna like go home and come back. That's tough.
We got about 25 minutes left here on our Q&A session with Daniel Negreanu. If you want to get your questions in, please do so in the chat here on YouTube. Please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. We're going to go through as many of these as we can. Neil is wondering, do you enjoy taking pictures with fans, or is it something you feel obligated to do?
I would say neither of those things is exactly how I would describe it. I would say, yes, I do feel somewhat obligated because people come out, it's a moment for them. Some people drive from Idaho and they want that picture. So I feel, somewhat like, it's the least I could do. Right. As far as like it, I appreciate that people want to take a picture with me. It's a very nice feedback. It's a very positive thing. But I mean, like, let's be honest, right? If I'm playing poker, I'd rather just sit and play poker. You don't quote unquote want to do it. Right. But I do it because it's the right thing to do,
Yeah, absolutely. Totally understand. A few people wondering about Doyle and how Doyle should be honored at the WSOP. Of course, the 50K trophy is the Chip Reese trophy. Do you think that something like that in relation to Doyle's legacy is also in the cards? Have you heard any discussion about perhaps any sort of ceremony for him at the WSOP, or perhaps a way in which you think they will honor him?
It's funny you say that because I just thought of because I was like, you're right, Chip Reese trophy, and you've got, the main, but like I thought about with Doyle, there was a point in Doyle's career where like we played what's called Doyle Says. So I think calling like the dealer's choice Doyle Says could be kind of fun. And it was a game where like just whatever game Doyle made up, that's what you'd play, and he was very, very good. He said, yeah, I'll play anybody at Doyle Says. But as far as what will happen at the World Series, I do think, there's talks already of sort of creating some kind of a ceremony, looking at the best time within the schedule to do that, and maybe have like a handful of people sort of speak about Doyle and maybe have a video, maybe a dinner or something like that. But I think it makes sense. Doyle was one of the few people that was there for day one, when the World Series of Poker first started in 1970 all the way till today.
Let's see. The metal guy's asking, what have Paris and Horseshoe improved upon compared to last year? Have you been to the venue yet? Have you heard anything? Is there anything exciting going on?
I went down there, of course, to do my banking and stuff like that. And, the room really wasn't set up yet and stuff. As far as new things, I don't think this year we're going to see a lot different than the previous year, but I do think the year after that, like I think next year, I knew like when I spoke to some people about some like changes they'd like to implement going forward, some really cool stuff. Like there's a few things that I'd like to see, right? Number one, I'd like to see food runners coming to the table, right? Because you're playing these World Series poker events. If you play the night shift, the 2 p.m., you don't get a dinner break, right? So unless you're planning on getting food somewhere, it's very difficult. So having sort of an app where, there's a limited menu or whatever, and you can order food and it comes to your table, obviously with a delivery charge or whatnot. And, having enough people, and at the very least starting that with like the high buy-in events, and then maybe it trickles down because it's obviously logistically much more difficult than a $300 Gladiator, right? But I think like, that would be very worthwhile. That's a union issue. There's a couple obstacles to face there. And then just overall, like in continuing to like elevate the technology and automation of the whole registration system.
Right. As far as the move away from the Rio, I'm sure many people that are watching have maybe been to the WSOP in prior years. Last year was only the first year at the Horseshoe. How would you compare the two, and how do you feel about the change in general?
There was a lot of concerns going into the first year. First and foremost, we were worried about traffic and parking because we didn't know, you're on the strip for the first time. The Rio had a great parking lot off the strip, very easy to get in and out. But that ended up not being an issue at all. It's pretty seamless. Like people park in the back, there was VIP parking. It worked out really, really well. As far as like, the venue itself, I mean, I liked playing at the Rio. It was very easy and comfortable for me. I had the RV and whatnot, but at the Paris Bally's location, there's no question it's a much better experience. Ceilings are very high, and the air is you don't need a hoodie like you did before. Like before, it would get freezing in there, right? That's never the case. The temperature control was really, really good. Nicer venue. It's also like right on the strip, so you're like right around a bunch of shops and restaurants and different things, and it's cool to get to. So I think if you haven't been, and the last time you went was a Rio, I think for almost everyone, they think it's an elevated experience playing over at Paris Bally's. Or no, Horseshoe now. Excuse me.
Horseshoe, yes. Yeah, that's also a change that still has to stick. We mentioned snacks earlier, and now being at the new venue, and you already mentioning pizza, I just want to get your take on the food options. Of course, we all know you're vegan. Are there vegan options at the Horseshoe? And in regards to the pizza you mentioned, do you get it from somewhere specific?
So when you think of Paris and you think of French food, you don't think of vegans.
No.
It is the worst possible option for a vegan because everything is drenched in butter, cream, and bacon and fish sauce or whatever the heck you guys eat, right? So definitely there's really nothing that I look at the menus. I do everything. I outsource. All my snacks, like I said, I order them, I bring them. I have a whole room full of them and I bring them down. And then for food, I pack my fridge with sort of groceries that I bring myself. And then I'll order, I'll have my assistant Patty, because it's not really that feasible to have like Uber Eats or Postmates. And she'll go, like, I'll just text her. I was like, all right, for 8 p.m., I want Tarantino's vegan. I want this. Pizza, there's one spot that I really like. It's called Evil Pie. EVEL. They make these big, massive pizzas, and they make a really good vegan pepperoni and whatnot. I don't know if they still sell that one, but that would be my number one. And then there's another place called Blaze Pizza that does like a diet cheese version kind of thing. So those would be, the two that come to mind. Top of my head.
What was the pizza count last year during WSOP?
How many?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. Like, I mean, every year that is probably the one like food that like it doesn't matter if it's cold or hot. It's always a good time to have sliced pizza. It's like there's never like, oh no, it's too early. Fine, breakfast. Let's go.
Exactly, I totally agree. Interesting question here from a user named Totally Unique Words. He says, Daniel, have you ever thought about quitting poker?
I was asked that on an AMA, or actually yesterday, once when I was a teenager, and I went broke and owed money and I didn't have it. So I just couldn't play and I didn't play. And I was like, I guess I got to do the school thing. And that was about 6 months. And then I was, able to get a whole little bit of money and inch my way back in. And from that point on, I never has it dawned on me to quit playing the game. There's been moments that were tough, and I wondered if I could continue doing it as a professional, but there was only one time that I thought about quitting.
Another banger here from a user named PDC. He says, would you rather win the World Series of Poker main event or overtake Helmuth as the all-time bracelet winner?
I'd say the main event. I mean, the main event's pretty special, especially now. The main event when I grew up, you're talking about 200, 300 players max. And now, with 8,000 people. And it's just a spectacle, right? The main event is like nothing else. The main event is, all eyes are on the main event. So that's definitely the one to win.
I think if you wander the Rio hallways, you can still feel the tremble of you crashing down onto the floor when you busted just short of the final table the year that Joe McKeon won. How often do you think back of a moment like that as like, a what if type scenario?
Yeah, certainly a lot of what ifs with that one. And there was a couple reasons why, I'll tell you. But there's also the one where I came 11th the year Carlos Mortensen won. And I was a young rookie back then in 2001. And I was chip leader with 12 to go. And I came in 11th. And I did things that I look back on now and I'm like, I'd never do that now. I'm basically played a huge flip with ace king against 2 6s in the spot where, I just didn't need to, but as far as the one with McKeon, there's a lot I look back on and say, like, I don't believe in stalling. I don't think it's just not my cup of tea. But there was a moment because the pay jumps in that specific year, they guaranteed $1 million for 9th. So the pay jumps were 9th is $1 million. 10th is 500,000. 11th is like 250K. So for most of these people, right, that's like a huge handcuff, which essentially allowed Joe McKeon, who had chips at the table, to just raise every hand. And oddly enough, at my table, we didn't have people stalling. Nobody was doing it, which was, I thought, people would. The other table, at one point, we realized, had played 45 fewer hands than we did, which is significant. That's 4 orbits, right? And that gives them an advantage. So looking back, I would have probably tried to pressure, because they eventually did say, okay, we're going to go to hand for hand here. I would have pressured that happening earlier. I would have likely pushed back even harder against Joe, because here's the thing. He's in a spot from ICM. He's literally opening any two from every position. So when that happens, it opens you up to just jam and stick in his face. And I'm not worried about the money. I'm trying to win. But again, that's not exactly my style either, right? So the very last hand that I went broke on, I had a ace 4 or something, and it came ace king 10, 2 diamonds. I check raised them all in on the flop. He called with jack 3 of diamonds. I was ahead, turn a blank, river, he hit the diamond. Where obviously that hand, if I just shove free, he's going to fold. But yeah. I had my reasons.
Yeah. Shout out to Zvi Stern, the one of the most notorious tankers in WSOP history. And that, of course, sends sort of a shockwave through the poker world when you bust it out, because everybody was like, oh, he's going to for sure make it. And then, McKeon, just unstoppable, and also had luck on his side, and then went on to completely destroy that final table, which was quite a display. We have that, by the way, on PokerGo for those that want to relive those moments. It's all in our on-demand section. Okay, we're going to take a few more questions before we wrap this up. So get them in now. Last chance here, 15 minutes left. That's been amazing. Daniel, thank you, by the way, for making time. I know that this is your time, your final time to rest up before...
Yeah, when you told me, I thought you said 9 minutes, not 90.
No. 9 minutes. Yeah, we're going a little bit over. We're going a little bit over. But yeah, a few more left here. Let's see. I mean, I was trying to avoid this topic because it can be so long-winded. So let's try not to make it long-winded. But the discussion about the real-time solvers and GTO Wizard and all the apps and options that you currently have to improve your poker game, and specifically the use of those on your phone during your play. Like, what are your thoughts on that? This sort of blew up a little bit on Twitter over the last couple of days. Lots of people have hot takes, and some have very smart ideas on this. How do you look at that?
Yeah, so I'm all for people learning, using these tools to improve their poker game away from the table. It's like essential, for a lot of people. It's a great way to study. There's no reason why you shouldn't take advantage of what's available there, right? It is, of course, a very bad look if you're doing it at the table, right? Now, it does happen, and I've seen it happen in the high stakes, tournaments that I play. But there's two separate ways to look at it. There's one which is looking up hands you just played, right? Which is totally fine. There's really no downside. It's like, whatever, I'm curious. Did I play this right? Nothing wrong with that. It's the same as texting your friend and saying, hey, what do you think of this hand? There's nearly no difference. The issue comes up when you're using it, obviously during a hand, forget it. That's like completely out of line. When you're using it, say in short stack situations with ICM, where you're going to be under the gun next hand, and you have the stack sizes, and then you have your phone here, and then you input it, and it gives you the exact ranges and what you should jam, right? That's now affecting the action going forward, and that's the stuff that should not be allowed. The issue we have is it's impossible to police this, because the organizers are never going to play the game of, let me see your phone, right? They're never going to want to go down that privacy where, they say, we need to open up your phone and show us what you've been looking at. Like, that's just not something that they want to do. So I think it's one of those rules similar to jaywalking, where we implement the rule. Like, jaywalking is illegal, right? People do it all the time. What happens? Nothing. Nobody gets a ticket, but it's still illegal for good reason, right? It's still illegal for good reason. So I think at the very least, we set up the rule in that regard where we just say that's not allowed. And then if we find people, or just enough people come forward and say, it's this person's doing that, maybe there are repercussions, maybe there aren't. But yeah, it's a tough spot, because obviously nobody thinks it's good for poker. But it's also, again, like, how do you police someone texting their friend and saying, what do I do next hand? I got 7 bigs.
Right. Yeah, and of course, that information is more and more available. It's faster. It's easier to access than ever before. So this only seems like the start of something much larger, in a way in which they're gonna evolve this sort of assistance as it pertains to live play. And let's not even talk about online play. Like, that is a whole different ball game, and extremely hard to police. And we've all heard the stories and the rumors, some confirmed, some unconfirmed, of some of the stuff that goes on in these online games as it pertains to the real-time assistance. Let's see. A quick one here. Jacob Cropper. Do you actually enjoy playing with Phil Hellmuth?
I do. Love it. It's the most fun. It is. Like, he's my favorite guy to watch, because you're watching you're watching hoping for a train wreck, because that's the funniest moment. Like it's not that you're like, I want him to lose, like just in general, but it's like so much more fun to watch him lose a hand and lose his mind, because that's so authentic. That's just him ranting, and I have a deep appreciation for that. So playing with him, he's just unique, a unique individual. So yeah, absolutely love playing with him.
Question here asking, what player has busted you the most? And I'm going to take that into, which player have you sort of had the hardest time with over the years?
Sort of mentioned him before, and I feel like the tide has turned a little bit, where I've started to maybe win a couple pots. But there's always a guy that you feel like holds over you in spots, and that's always been Scott Siever for me. It's probably why I mentioned him earlier. He's always kind of like, just seems like if I make a move, then he goes all in. Like what? Huh? I don't get it. So yeah, he's just I feel like, and that's the thing. You can get confused sometimes in those spots where it's like, is he just that much better, or does he have a read, or is it just also card distribution variance, right? So you kind of have to figure that out after a while. And a lot of times it's just card distribution and just the way that it feels to you. And that's it. But other times it's a legitimate read.
Bob with the question, do you think that online bracelets should be counted separately from live events? And I'm going to expand on this a little bit. And do you think that bracelets won outside of Las Vegas should be counted differently than the ones in Vegas?
For me, it's quite simple. Okay. Is it a bracelet or is it not a bracelet? If it's a bracelet, it's a bracelet, right? If it's a legit open event bracelet, it counts as a bracelet. I don't decide which events count as bracelets, but there is a group that says, okay, these are bracelet events. When something's considered a bracelet event, like in my day, there was no $1,500 buy-in tournaments. It was $2,000 minimum. We would have thought like a $300 gladiator. Come on, for a bracelet back in our day, that was like crazy, but we've already sort of opened the floodgates on that. Right. So there's all kinds of events. And, during the World Series, the fact that they count, I don't think they should be separate. I mean, I think, as long as they're sparing, I mean, the last thing you want to have is like, 100 online bracelets a year. Cause now you're going to see it kind of really distort potentially the numbers, and then all of a sudden Phil Ivey might lose to probably Ali Shermshervich, I think has like 32 bracelets already. I don't know.
Flipping the question around from earlier about the player who you've been unluckiest or had the hardest time against, is there someone whose number you have? Is there a player that is like, oh no, not this guy, when you show up to their table?
If you ask him, he will tell you this. Sean Winter. He's like, for a long time, he's like, I never ever win a pot against you. So, and it's just one of those things. It's not like a couple times I made some good moves against him, but just generally speaking, any key pots we've played, I've held over him.
A few quick hitters before I let you go. A few people have asked variations of this question. How can they follow you this summer? Like, what places are you going to be most active? What are the names of the channels? Give us a little bit of a rundown.
First and foremost, I will not be active on social media. I don't during the World Series. I'm not in there tweeting and doing all kinds of stuff. I have somebody who tweets for me during the World Series in the morning when they release the vlog. So where you want to follow along, first and foremost, really the only most important place is watch the vlog. So subscribe to the channel. If you go to youtube.com, put my name in, you'll find my channel. Subscribe. That way every morning when the videos release, you'll see one, and you'll be able to keep up to date. And it's the great thing about it is if you avoid sort of looking at results that day, you can essentially watch the vlog and live vicariously without knowing the results. So it can be like a quote unquote reality TV sort of thing where if you have a sweat or you don't, you can keep up to date with everything I'm doing. So everything focused on the vlog on YouTube.
There we go. So just stay tuned to YouTube. Don't have to worry about TikTok and Instagram and all those places. Do you ever allow yourself to have a drink at the table during the WSOP? And if you do, what's the drink of choice?
So generally that's a no, right? There's one exception. Well, every year during the GG party, I'm going to get shit faced, and there'll be a video where I can't find my car or something like that. Like I get so drunk and so out of line. It's so ridiculous. Like I look back, I'm like, holy smokes, why did I air that? But it's fun. I think a lot of people sort of look for it. Some people hate it, think it's super cringe, and that's okay. Maybe it's not for them. But what was the rest of your question?
Well,
drinking. Yeah. And then there was one other day, like near the end of the World Series, I would, if it was like the little one for one drop, I'm out of the main, sort of the DGen moment, where I'll have I'll just drink some beers. at the table, something like that. The night that we had the sort of scare of the fake shooter, that was the one night I drank beer. Like the one time I'm sitting there, I'm having a blast, it's a great table. I sit there with a beer, my phone's on the table. I see this crowd of people rushing, and I just drop everything. I don't bring my phone, and I start trying to run, and I kept getting knocked over. And that's when I had that huge gash in my hand that, was pretty scary because you could see like cartilage underneath my hand and that was just from carpet burn. It's crazy.
Yeah. Wow. I had stuffed that memory away somewhere deep. That was a crazy night. Very, very bizarre. Okay, a few more here. 5 minutes left. Let's see. What do we got? Do you ever play any video games?
I used to be really big into video games. Like growing up as a kid, I played everything. But I found that as I've gotten older, like then I got addicted to Hearthstone. I had to quit because I was spending 12 hours a day. So the game that I play now, and I'm getting worse, as you know, because you've played me, is I'm getting worse at chess. Playing on chess, I'm actually getting worse. It's crazy. Probably because I don't play as much as I used to. And then like wordscapes and whatnot. But as far as like, I like the old school games, like the simple run and jump, like run, jump, shoot, 3 buttons. Like these controllers now that have 87 buttons, and like you play a hockey game and you have to like use 7 fingers to just skate. Like what? You just press forward. You're like, what happened to the old days? It's simpler. So I have an arcade here. It's called an arcade. I've got a Golden Tee. I have the NBA Jam, NFL Blitz, old school video games. And the arcade is basically it has a keg of beer in it. And it's an arcade system that has every game made before the year 2000 on all the different platforms, whether it was Atari, Intellivision, Nintendo, everything, Sega.
That's cool. I think I need that as well. Let's see. Oh, are there any follow-ups, or was there any follow-up with the fake family story from last year? Did anything come of that?
There have been plenty of follow-ups, unfortunately. Ultimately, I think the biggest concern for me and Amanda is this a violent person, right? Clearly, there are issues mentally, right? Because this person genuinely believes that I was in Lake Havasu and had a family when I was like in 1996. I was 20 something years old, in Canada, and he genuinely believes it, and he sends pictures of my kids and all this kind of stuff. It's just super bizarre. Luckily it feels like it's resolved, but it never fully is. Like, I don't know, I'm hoping it's over, but you never know. Probably bringing it up now if he's watching this. He's like, "How dare you talk about me?" I don't know, but yeah,
right.
I had the FBI look at it and everything, and ultimately we deemed that this wasn't a, dangerous person from a physical perspective, but we never know.
Right. Hendrix is asking, Daniel, was the last time you visited Romania? Do you have any relatives still there? Any plans to visit in the future?
It's been years. It's been a few years. I went like last time I had a blast, man. I was living like a degen. I was waking up at 3, 4 p.m. and partying all night, at the different clubs and stuff. It was a lot of fun. Had a really good time. It was cool. It sort of makes you feel connected to your family. I don't have my parents, but when I'm there in Romania, I feel like they're there. And yeah, no plans as of yet, but like, I think at one point, because Amanda came with me once many years ago before we were married. She came on a trip and she loved it there. So I think one day maybe we'll do like a week and we'll just really experience the city together.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, reminds me that I should maybe visit home sometimes. It's been a while since I've been back across the Atlantic. Daniel, thank you so much for being with us on the show. Thanks everyone for tuning in. On your way out, please smash the like button, subscribe to the channel. Streaming on the YouTube channel starts on June 1st. But of course, don't forget to watch the 25K Fantasy Draft coming up on Monday. That should also be a good time. Daniel, thanks again, and looking forward to following along with the madness for the next 50 so days.
Yeah, I'm getting all the media stuff out now so that during the series, you're not allowed to bother me at all.
I will bother you. Just wait. But it's hopefully going to be like table side, final table, winner circle. That's going to be a good time to bother you. All right, for now, thanks so much, and we'll see you at the Horseshoe.